الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله ذي الملك والملكوت ذي العزة والجبروت. الحمد لله حي قيوم لا ينام، عزيز لا يضام، قهار لا يرام. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. يقول الباري سبحانه وتعالى بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared, and they not except on the state of Islam. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most merciful bestow upon us the gift to die on the state of Islam. Allahumma ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Taghabun بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله. No calamity, no disaster that strikes or befalls, but by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leave, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permission, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destiny and decree. وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. And whoever believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah certainly will guide his heart and her heart. Al-Imam al-Qurtubi in this ayah, he said, it has been narrated that one of the reasons of revelation of this ayah, that the disbeliever, they said, if it truly the Muslims, they were on the right path, they would not have been struck by disasters. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah. I mean, their God will have protecting them from the disaster. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this ayah to show and to let know the believer that there is no calamity that befall on this world, on this universe, but by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not question that they are on the right path or the wrong path. But in the same time, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reinforce a concept in the heart of the believers, such a concept to give peace to the mind of the believers, and a concept in the way of their creed to be firm, to be strong, and to not be, subhanAllah, subject to the calamities when they happen, for people to turn away, or for people to get, to be defeated, for people to lose strength, for people to lose hope. That's not the way of the Aqeedah of Islam. And knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything, that everything that's happening in this cosmos, in this universe, by the leave and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything by His irada, by His will, everything by His wisdom, everything by His knowledge subhanahu wa ta'ala. It helps us also to understand whatever calamity that befall on us personally, particularly as a community, as a family, is really defining in a way the size of your understanding, of your relation with Allah. Define also the way how someone will view certain virtues like perseverance, like patience. Because when someone, for example, loses some money, he feels so hurt. And he feels so like in pain. And he feels like, enduring such a patience too, or like having such a patience, big patience to endure such a calamity. But this need to be like a question. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had us to live in a world when we see an injustice, an oppression above that we could have ever imagined. Therefore, what's happening today to our people in Gaza help us really to view the world from different perspective, to help us understand that the calamities and the disaster that strike, it's bigger than the very small thing that happened to us, and truly there is no any comparison. Therefore, when seeing such a thing, seeing people losing their homes, losing their children, losing their families, losing their belonging, they're being threatened, killed, and all, subhanAllah, ethnic cleansing happening. And all of that, when you think about it, It requires for us really, it imposes on us to reflect and to ponder, to go back to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to review the true concept, the true, or like how deep are the concept of the virtue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the book of Allah. The sabr is not a sabr because I lost some money, I need sabr. There is sabr, as you can see, people that lost everything. Perseverance, striving, all those meanings. Fear and grief, it has totally different meaning. How can someone will be avoid, or how can someone will submit and fulfill the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not have fear and to not have grief when they going through such calamities? And this is subhanallah, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised you, if you understand such a depth, then Allah will guide your heart. Therefore, we need to understand such a depth in comparison of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed us to live as a trial for the whole ummah, trial for the whole humanity, and for the people who are enduring such a thing. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them, give them victory, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the relief as soon as possible. Now, in the such or the same scenery, or like the same condition of oppression, of injustice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us a story. And this is the story is going to be our analogy to help ourselves understand the depth of certain concepts in the Quran and what are their instruction. It's not always because when you read the Quran in the superficial way, without related to the reality that we live in, because living in a situation like the people of Gaza, and you tell me do not fear, how cannot not fear? And do not grieve, how cannot not grieve? And this is subhanAllah the requirement of the understanding of the teaching of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you rejuvenate your iman, restructure it and redefine it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such context, a context of oppression, of injustice, done by Fir'aun to the people of Musa alayhi salam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, our will, our intent is to make these weak people to be the inheritor, to be the example of faith, the example and role model of goodness, of righteousness, and to establish them on the earth. And everything started, the destruction of the oppression and the throne of Fir'aun, a throne of him based on oppression and injustice and killing and inequality and all what you can name it, from obscenity, immorality. All of it started by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspiring to the mother of Musa to nurse him. In Surah Al-Qasas, وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَىٰ أَنْ أَرْضِعِهِ. Now at the beginning of the ayah, it has kind of, subhanAllah, is strange. How can you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ordaining the mother of Musa to nurse him. Why? Because she was so scared. Because in the whole town, they're looking for any, nursing or like a small child to be killed. قال فأرضعيه فإذا خفت عليه فألقيه في اليم. Nurse him. If you fear for him, then cast him into the river. ولا تخافي ولا تحزني. Do not fear, do not grieve. And this is the question of what is the dalala of لا تخافي ولا تحزني. What is the instruction? What is the meaning? What it means, like, I ordain you to not fear and to not grieve. This is my child. At any moment, so that they can cast into my home and they can take him and rip him apart, slay him, kill him in front of me. لا تخافي ولا تحزني. And here, dear brother, by analogy, whoever who's going through calamity, and our big example today is that no one can compare it to the people of Gaza. Say how this is apply for them or apply for us also if you're going through difficulties. Because we have to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered for the mother of Musa to not fear and to not grieve is in reality an order to help her save her child. Because the grief and the fear, and the difference between al-hazan wal-khawfu, al-khawfu is the feeling for something that is going to happen and known, so it makes you subhanAllah so scared. and the grief of something that happened, that it goes against your longing, something that you have lost, something that you like, and something bad happened, which has caused you something, psychological effect, emotional, that someone is like grieving, that he's sad. So when someone is trapped between sadness and fear, then this person, subhanAllah, lose all his spirit. Losing their spirit, losing their, subhanAllah, strength, losing hope, and make them, subhanAllah, cast into their inner soul cowardice. Therefore, the person becomes like, subhanAllah, is like frozen. He cannot do anything. He cannot even think, because the fear, subhanAllah, take away all the strength, all the zeal from this person, eradicate their hope, and make them to be someone passive, scared, and subhanAllah, coward is in the way, in the literal way, or the meaning of the way, of the term. Now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال لا تخافي ولا تحزني, so ordaining her to fight the grief and the fear for the reason to continue to act, to preserve her strength, so she will be able to give life to her child. She will be able to nurse her child, because her child is in need of her. So if she is, subhanAllah, trapped by the fear and the grief, and killed by the fear and the grief, therefore her son, he's going to be the one. Who's going to be like the killer of her son? Is the fear and the grief, not the soldier of Fir'aun. That's why لا تخافي ولا تحزني. It is to preserve one's strength, to preserve one's hope, to preserve one's zeal, so they can continue to act. So the continuation to act, the continuation to strive, the continuation to preserve the hope which is guiding you, which is leading you, that only comes by declining and fighting and defeating the fear and the sadness. ولا تخافي ولا تحزني. قال فإذا خفت عليه, when truly you are scared of him, you fear for him. Now you fear for him something like tangible, something that concrete. Yes, you're hearing like, subhanAllah, the footsteps of the soldiers outside. Something is concrete, it's not something that imaginary. So you act upon it. This is, you came to the limit of your abilities. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us in such a context. You fight the grief, you fight the sadness, you fight the fear, so you can continue act, so you can continue build, so you can continue have hope. Because when you do such a thing, nothing will stop you, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you building. For the case of Musa alayhi salam, who's going to nurse him? Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to be, subhanAllah, shower him with the blessing and turning around Musa alayhi salam, this baby who does not have any power or any strength to help himself, except the mother. The obstacle for such a thing is the fear and the grief. So every believer, when you are struck by disaster, the first thing that you have to do is to fight the grief and to fight the sadness and to fight the fear. Because that is going to steal everything good within you and make you, subhanAllah, someone passive, coward, and subhanAllah, devoid of any hope. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when you came to the limit of your effort, قال فألقه في اليوم. And this is, subhanAllah, greater, it's bigger and stronger as a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're asking a caring mother to cast her child in the river. But here, subhanAllah, the power of the belief. It's not going to be cast in the river. It's going to be cast in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The river is servant of Allah. It flows by the will of Allah. Therefore, Musa alayhi salam, the baby, is going to be under the care of the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. في حفظه, in his safeguarding, وحرسه subhanahu wa ta'ala, and protection. And this is, subhanAllah, it's like in our life, when you come to this situation and you're looking at the size of the calamities that our people are enduring, to help yourself understanding that the instruction in the Quran to not grieve and to not fear, it's not to find happiness, it's not to find tranquility so you can be passive and go watch shows in empty and peaceful mind. No, to not grieve and to not fear so you can continue work, you can continue build, You can continue, have perseverance. That's why the one who's trapped in grief and fear, he will be, subhanAllah, someone who's devoid or being stripped from all zeal, from all strength, from all hope, and becomes someone ajizun qanitun, ajiz, incapable, ajizun, he cannot do anything, qanitun, consumed by despair. And when someone, subhanAllah, is trapped in despair and this incapability, he became, subhanAllah, someone coward, someone who cannot do anything, someone who's like better being dead. That's why to not fear and to not grieve, and as an order from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you believers, continue to strive. So your fight against fear and your fight against the grief. And of course, nobody can eradicate all the fear from their heart or grief. We are talking about the fear and the grief that cause you to lose your zeal, that cause you to lose your hope, that cause you to lose all what, subhanAllah, your raja, that cause you to be a person coward, passive, and kneel for anyone who will dictate on you the way or suggest on you a way of salvation. Because the only way that salvation is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you understand such a thing, therefore, we ask the question, how someone can make it? How can someone fight the fear and the grief? Something, subhanAllah, is above our nature as a human being. We are human beings by nature are weak. How can we fight it? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us many aspects. One of these main two aspects, two great aspects, dear brother, respected sister. The first one is the surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's something that is obvious. But when you surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, between you and the next moment is in the hand of Allah, is not in the hand of your enemy, is not in the hand of the one who threatened you, is not in the hand of the calamity that being, subhanAllah, befell on you. It's in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, when you surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, complete surrendering, you say, Aslamtu lillah. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to decree for me is going to be good for me. That's the istislam. The first thing is the istislam. And that istislam help you to counter back the fear and the grief. The second is the patience. And the patience, not any patience, not any perseverance, dear brother, respected sister, here patience that is surrounded by hope and ignited by shawq. Subhanallah, look, patience, because when you surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the next thing that you need is to be patient. But this patience will not have a power. You will not be able to endure it only if you have a strong hope in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your certain hope in Allah's promise is going to feed this patience. And then what is going to ignite it, what is going to nourish it, give it the right nurtures, the right food, the right, subhanAllah, way is your shawq. What is the shawq? Your longing to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, the amal, the hope, and the shawq is that God, subhanAllah, to mentor and to give strength to your patience so you will be able to defeat the fear and the grief. To be able to defeat the fear and the grief. And here, subhanAllah, you become an active person, a person who's still striving, a person who's patient, a person who's engaged in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking the pleasure of Allah. Nothing will help them, nothing will stop them. Like the mother of Musa, she was nursing her baby, knowing that he's, in jeopardy, knowing that he's in danger, but it's like nothing happened. Nothing happened. Why? Because she defeated the fear and she defeated the grief inside her heart. And then when it came to the moment, she put him in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where? In the river. In the hand of Allah. Allah will take care of him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He told her that. And that is the wa'd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you think about such a thing, we have the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam. I'll give you an example as an analogy, an example for us. Ibrahim alayhi salam, his Lord, he told him, submit, qala aslamtu li rabbil alameen. Full submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how the believer need to be. He had the full knowledge. He has, subhanAllah, the ultimate, the all wisdom, the absolute will, So subhanAllah, surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, not just to declare the shahada, surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to submit your will to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the way how you honor yourself. This is the way how you dignify yourself. This is the way how you elevate yourself and preserve your strength, preserve your spirit, preserve your power, and preserve that hope that guiding you, that helping you to live and to breathe into your life. Ibrahim قال أسلمت لرب العالمين. Then the sabr of Ibrahim, the patience of Ibrahim, you can see it is subhanAllah surrounded with hope. The hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always with him. So when he was about to be thrown in the fire, what he said? He said, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. So that's a synonym of hope and sabr. Hasbi Allah, he's like in full patience, in full serenity, in full reassurance. His heart subhanAllah is quiet and calm. And he's like, Hasbi Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Hasbi is enough, sufficient for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for me and the disposal of all my affairs. What is going to happen next is not my concern. If I'm going to die, this is going to be a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the believer is not holding and biting on life to not die. Death is only a passage to something great in Islam. The greatest actually into your existence. So the next moment, if Allah calls me to die, then alhamdulillah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept me to be among the martyrhood. And then if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala define for your life, there is another opportunity for you to continue to strive in the sake of Allah, to elevate yourself in the ranks of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see here, Ibrahim, and then the shaykh that was leading Ibrahim, I'll give you an example to apply on what we have said. So the shaykh that longing for Ibrahim, you see him like in many places, إِنِّي ذَاهِبٌ, I'm going to my Lord to guide me. After Allah saved him from the fire. And he's saying, إِنِّي مُهَاجِرٌ, I'm going to migrate to my Lord, إِنَّهُ هُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. So that what leading Ibrahim, what guiding Ibrahim, what subhanAllah keep him going forward is that longing to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same you find it with Yunus alayhi salam. Yunus, when he was trapped into the stomach of the whale, he called La ilaha illa ant. La ilaha illa ant is the full surrendering. Surrender to Allah. So the first aspect to eradicate and fight the grief and the fear, first aslam lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, قال إن لم يكن بك غضب علي فلا أبالي. If there is no, if it's not a matter of anger from you toward me, Allah, so I don't care. Whatever is going to happen, it's something good. Wallah, if you lose everything, it's something good. Why? Because life, it's not what you're going to endure here. The true life, the true result of your life when you die. So therefore, when Allah is with you, then you are with everything. Everything good is with you. So Yunus alayhi salam قال لا إله إلا أنت, لا إله إلا أنت. This is the meaning of surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanak, be exalted, Ya Allah. If I had a mistake, or I thought that you will not take me or like hold me accountable for this, and this is subhanAllah, help him to have that sabr, help him to connect back with Allah and to acknowledge that he was one of the wrongdoers. That's the longing that he has for Allah to accept him back. And you see, subhanAllah, the equation of istislam and patience with hope and guided and led by the longing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also in the story of Yunus. And Allah summarized it in a beautiful ayah when the companion of Allah ta'ala alayhim, they saw the Confederate army. قال ولما رأى المؤمنون الأحزاب قالوا هذا ما وعدنا الله ورسوله. When the believer, they saw the Confederate army, they said, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised us and His messenger. Now the most amazing or like surprising thing to ask like as a question, this is a big army. This is a big army that is present to eradicate the Prophet ﷺ and the companion of Allah Ta'ala alayhi. However, this big army, they said, the companion, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ. When the believer, they saw the Confederate army. So the Confederate army, the believer that didn't have any power to meet them. The believer that they didn't have any power to overcome them. However, the believer, they know that there is a group from the disbeliever coming from above them, and group from those who betray them from the people of the book, and group from the hypocrite who betray them from inside. So when they saw such a thing, they said, وَلَمَّا رَأَى الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الْأَحْزَابَ قَالُوا هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. This is what Allah and His Messenger promised us. Now the question mark, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger promised you? Promise you that you're going to be eradicated? Promise you that you're going to be defeated? No, He promised them that they did all what they can do, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be helping them. So when they saw everything, so they do not have in the physical world, with the materialistic meaning, they do not have means to defeat them. Which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send His help now. Allah is going to send His help now. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent His help, they said, هَذَا مَا وَعَدَنَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger has promised us. قَالَ وَصَدَقَ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. And Allah and His Messenger, they say the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given us the result of such strong belief in their heart. قَالَ وَمَا زَادَهُمْ إِلَّا إِيمَانًا وَتَسْلِيمًا. Increase them in faith and increase them in submission and surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, you see, dear brother, respected sister, in the position that when you are facing such calamities, if you surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bring the sabr with its element of hope and led by the shawq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you find yourself close to Allah. You find yourself, you get rid from that type of fear and type of grief that is going to steal away from you your strength, your power, your hope, and make it to be, wal-iyadu billah, a coward person. And comes to the conclusion here. It's not about, dear brother, respected sister, when is the victory is going to happen? When is the help is going to happen? When the people of Gaza, they're going to be, subhanAllah, or the transgressor, they're going to be defeated. Mata Nasrullah, because Allah answered this question. He said, the help of Allah is near. The victory of Allah is near. As we might see it far, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala see it close. So what is the great matter that we need to be concerned of? It's not when things is going to end, when the relief is going to come. The question is, when such calamity strike you, when such disaster strike you, and you'll feel like shaken from the depth of your soul, look at your heart. Where is your heart from Allah? That's the most important thing in all your entire existence, if I can say. Because when such a thing happens, you look at your heart and you ask, where is your heart from Allah? Are you ready to stand firm and continue to strive, or to betray yourself and run away? Because that position of the heart upon which is going to be decided your future. Look at Musa, when she fulfilled what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told her. Even after she cast her child in the river, she was scared. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strengthened her heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent her back her child. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make her to feel the delight of the eye to have her child back in her chest and hugging him. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us for her to know that the promise of Allah is the promise of the truth. The same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us for Musa alayhi salam, who was scared after he killed a person. He killed the person a way of doing justice. But it happened, and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiveness. Then he was even scared when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him with his brother. And he said, Ya Allah, I killed the person. I fear that they're going to kill me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no. If you be you like Musa, if you be in a way of surrendering to Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you an authority that to protect you. Protect you. Can you imagine Fir'aun with all his soldiers, he could not kill Musa, who was lonely with his brother, because of this authority. وَقَالَ سَنَشُدُّ عَضُدَكَ بِأَخِيكَ. We're going to give you assistance with your brother. وَنَجْعَلُ لَكُمَا سُلْطَانًا. I want to make for you an authority with which that nobody can touch you, as Allah will do it for you. قَالَ بِآيَاتِنَا. With our signs of guidance, the miracle that Allah gave to Musa, the signs that Allah gave us to the Quran, the connection that you have with Allah, He's safeguarding for you, He's a protection for you. With these signs, you, Musa, and whoever follow your path, no one will overcome you. And this is, dear brother, respected sister, the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, into analyzing what is around us, help us, dear brother, respected sister, to understand that no fear and no grief, for continue to work for the sake of Allah, and knowing that surrendering and have patience make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you such an authority to help you, protect you, and safeguard you. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على النبي المصطفى أما بعد. All what we can see and everything that's happening, it is happening by the will of Allah. There's no one who can shoot a bullet or send a bomb or do whatever they intended to do or they have done. It's only happened by the will of Allah, by the decree of Allah, by the knowledge of Allah. And all what we are witnessing is, subhanAllah, a setup, or, I'm sorry for the word, not setup, but it is shakl. It is a way how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defining in our time this big, let's say, test of the life that we are enduring. Therefore, when he thinks of it, the believer has to transcend themselves. Because if you live trapped in on what you see, in all what you hear, then it's going to cause you that fear. It's going to cause you that grief. And then you'll be trapped, and if you're trapped, you cannot act. You lose your strength, you lose your hope, and you lose yourself. But if you transcend yourself, transcend your weakness, transcend the whispering around you that it casts doubt into your heart, and then you get rid of all those things that make you to cause you fear and grief, that really cast in you the cowardice and take away your strength and eradicate from you your hope. If you do such a thing, then you realize that, subhanAllah, your connection, it's not a connection in this physical world, but rather with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is into the eternity. And then when you look around you, and you might see that the falsehood is overcoming the whole world, and the truth does not have even, subhanAllah, a speck to exist. And you're saying like, there is no way of a relief. There is no way even an atom, if you are drowning, to hold on it to not drown. You have to be sure and certain that at this moment, if your heart is with Allah, Allah will create for you a path to save you. When the people of Musa, they saw Fir'aun and his army coming, they said, Inna la mudrakun. It is ultimately, it is the end, certainly. Qala kalla. No. The creation, how Musa and his people, they were saved, it was not created yet. And Musa didn't know it yet. قال كلا إن معي ربي سيهدين. With me, my Lord is going to help me. And Allah then, subhanahu wa ta'ala, inspired to Musa to hit the sea. And you know what happened? To make for them a path and to save them all. Therefore, dear brother, when you transcend yourself from all this physical world to liberate yourself, you'll find that it's not about you being established on earth or finding happiness on earth, because happiness on earth, it's not possible. And if it does exist, it's very short. So the believer look farther, look to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala قال وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, those who migrate in the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then they were killed or martyred, and or they died. لَيَرْزُقَنَّهُمُ اللَّهُ رِزْقًا حَسَنًا. Allah will provide for them the good provision. وَإِنَّهُ لَهُوَ خَيْرُ الرَّازِقِينَ. And the best of the provider is Allah. So imagine, when you come to death, it's whatever position you're going to be into the future. If you are today with Allah, then Allah will guarantee for you this provision. The provision, if you question about it, what type of provision? The next ayah, Allah will explain it to you. قَالَ لَنُدْخِلَنَّهُمْ مُدْخَلًا حَسَنًا. We're going to admit them a good admission, give them a good abode, it will please them. So the thing that you need to know, whatever Allah is going to give you is going to please you, is going to make you extremely happy. And that's here when it comes to ask yourself, therefore do not grieve, do not fear. Allah is indeed with you if you just surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to fulfill such, way to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to not have been trapped by the fear and the grief, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained Musa, the mother of Musa, to help her, to guide her. And it is a guidance for us, and she is a role model for us. And today in our people, what they are enduring, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them fight the fear and the grief, and give them the strength to continue to strive for the sake of Allah. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them, give them victory, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be with them. Allahumma ya Rabbana arhamhum bi rahmatik. اللهم ارحمهم برحمتك يا رب العالمين. اللهم أغثهم وارحمهم وأطعمهم وأسقهم. اللهم نفس كربهم وارفع عنهم همهم وانصرهم على الظالمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم يا ربنا لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. اللهم لك أسلمنا وبك آمنا وعليك توكلنا وبك خاصمنا وإليك أنبنا، فاغفر لنا ربنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين، وأقم الصلاة يرحمكم الله.